Carol and I gonna be over the weeks and months to come as we are coming into your life. We want to just talk about all kinds of things, everything from what it's like to recognize the voice and will of God for your life. And I mean, we're going to talk about marriage. We're going to talk about relationships. We're going to talk to those of you who are in those young adult years, those 20-something years, and the transition and how tough it is to make decisions, coming to those points and times in your life where you really got some tough things to decide about your life, your future, and learning how to recognize the voice of God for that time and what my life and everything is supposed to be like. I remember back in those days of trying to figure out the voice and the will of God for our life. I mean, everything from how Carol and I met to the time that we got married and all the years since. In fact, just telling you a little bit about us, we've been married since January the 3rd, 1981. I heard somebody say, you don't look old enough to be married that long. Thank you very much. We'll take that compliment. And but in all these years of marriage, and it's been quite a ride. It's been and God has blessed us to have a successful marriage. We have 3 sons, 3 children.
Awesome boys.
Yeah, and at the time that of this taping and of this recording and releasing this, our oldest is 21 years old, and then we have 16-year-old twins. Our sons' names are Christopher, who is the oldest, and Jonathan and David are our twin sons. And God has really just blessed us to have a incredible life in marriage. We've been involved in ministry for a great deal of our married life, and even now we are still involved in ministry through the Fruitful Life network of ministries. And I'd like to just go back, first of all, before we get into some of the word that the Lord is that the Lord has put in my wife. I want to go back and kind of talk about how we first met, things like that. I was in high school in 1977, getting ready to go to Oral Roberts University, and I remember when I got there, being a part of the freshman orientation, and they assembled us in the big really huge place called Mabee Center, which is where they played the basketball games and had all kinds of conferences and conventions there. And when we met, well, we didn't meet right away, but remember, I go ahead.
Yeah. When I was looking for familiar face, I one of the people that I graduated from high school with, I was looking for him. I was looking for a familiar face. I was feeling nervous and looking around the huge auditorium just to see who else was there. I saw this young man who was sitting in another row at the far end, at the other end, and I just felt better seeing another person of the same ethnicity.
And I remember noticing a young lady on the other end, and just like Carol said, it was predominantly white, and so we were the only 2 African Americans in the section that we were sitting in, so it was quite easy to spot one another. But then what was really interesting is that we found ourselves later on introduced to one another. A young lady that I had gone to elementary school with, knew her from the 2nd grade all the way through the 8th grade. And then in the high school years, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, I went to one of the public schools in the city of St. Louis, and she went to a different school. And then upon graduating, then I went to Oral Roberts University, and lo and behold, there she was at Oral Roberts University, someone who I hadn't seen since the 8th grade. And so as we happened upon each other and greeted one another, who was she walking with? A young lady who is sitting beside me right now. I didn't know when she introduced me to that young lady, I was being introduced to my wife. And of course, I didn't. I responded in such a way when she introduced us. I just kind of looked at this young lady and raised one eyebrow and just kind of said,
Didn't say a word. He didn't say a word.
I thought I said something. I was intending. In my mind, I said hi and just kind of nodded my head. And that kind of annoyed her when I did that. And she said, aren't you going to speak? And so I raised my voice a little bit more and just said, well, hi, And that was our beginning. We didn't get off to
a very good start.
A good start. You would never have known that these two people, the way that we started, that we would find ourselves, 25 years later involved in ministry and having been launched out in a ministry called Fruitful Lifestyles. The reason why I even bring that up about how we met is because we came into that relationship with a lot of hurts, a lot of pain. In fact, for me, the pain started even before I was born. My mother was pregnant with me when she lost her youngest child at the time. He was only 2 years old, and by a strangulation accident, he strangled on a piece of grapefruit on a summer morning. The family was getting prepared to go to vacation Bible school, and so here's her baby son. He strangles to death. And while my mother was in that state of tremendous grief and pain and crying out and wailing, in her womb, 7 months pregnant, I was within her womb at that time. And psychiatrists and psychologists will tell you that whatever the mother is going through in her pregnancy, especially in the latter stages, the child is directly affected by the emotional state and the mental state and the spiritual state of that mother. So a sense of grief and despair and overwhelming loss became a part of my psyche, if you allow me to say it that way, even before I got here. And I was a very melancholy, very sad, very pessimistic child. And I took that right into my adolescence and my teenage years. And so by the time I met the one who was to be my wife, that's why I responded the way I did. Even with meeting someone new, I just simply kind of nodded my head and really sad and really pessimistic and all that kind of thing. And so it kind of piqued the interest of this young lady. She wanted to know why this young man was so sad. And so she did find out why he was so sad. We got a chance to sit and talk. We shared a lot of things in common. We shared poetry, and writing in particular was one thing that we both did. And so we exchanged our poems, our writings, which was a big step. That was a big step to do such a thing, for me to share the things that I had been writing for many, many years. In fact, that was how I got out a lot of my feelings and processed a lot of things. And there are a lot of people that may be listening and watching us right now. That is how you kind of process through. Like some of you keep journals and you write poetry, or you write stories, or you play music. Some of you write songs, and the way you get out what you're feeling, you express it in creative ways like that. And I was no different, and Carol wasn't any different. And it was on that basis, that common ground was how we just started talking and sharing with one another.
How a relationship was formed.
Yeah. So it's been pretty. It was really interesting the way the Lord got us going, because for 3 years, I mean, even though we met at such a young age, the relationship really was built upon those common things and friendship. I mean, we didn't jump right into a romantic relationship. We really did get to know each other. And so it wasn't until 3.5 years later, after we met, that we got married. And so we came into the marriage with a pretty strong foundation of getting to know one another and starting to learn to understand one another. Of course, like any marriage, and there's a lot to get to know when you first get married, and the first 5 years had many, many challenges. Can't get into all of that, but it's really been something how the Lord led us through the years and brought us to a place of our own personal healing, even using one another to minister
Definitely.
to one another to get to some of those sensitive places. And Carol came into the relationship with a whole nother set of issues.
Yes, but for me, I came to school because I wanted, first of all, I just wanted something different for my life. My parents, by that time, had separated. They hadn't divorced, but it was a very painful separation. It devastated her. But in that, she said one thing to me that stuck with me. She told me to pray for my husband, and I took that, and I began to do that. I just started with some characteristics that I wanted in a husband, and I knew, of course, that those things would have to be adjusted. That list would have to be adjusted. But it was a beginning point. Because of that separation and of my viewpoint about what a father was changed, and of course that affected my viewpoint of God, since the father is an image of what God should be, or what God is, or it helps you to understand how you should relate to God as God the Father. But without that role model or image in my life, it was hard to relate to God as Father, as somebody who really cared about me personally. And so I carried that hurt into our relationship. I was always afraid that he would leave me for some reason. I didn't like to argue, because for me, arguing did not bring anything, did not bring resolve. It just meant separation. So those were some of the things that I had to work through, that he actually helped me to work through and to face and to deal with. God used him to heal those things in my life.
Yeah, because now she can argue with the best of them.
Yeah.
And it's okay. We'll get into that when we probably in the times that we are talking about marriage and relationships. We had to learn how to fight, but to fight fair.
Right.
So
there are boundaries. There are rules for fighting.
Yeah, and so all of that is a part of it, but it's a part of